It's another Manly Monday, and this Manly Monday, we're talking, yes, are we crushing boys' interests? And this has come out of my discussions about the man versus bear thing, um, joined by tree versus woman. Not touching that. This isn't the place. But it kind of is, because this idea of the catch-22 that men are in, of express your emotions and be in touch with them. Not like that though, right? That's the pitfall of the whole would you rather talk about your feelings to a tree or a woman? And you know, we know that other women don't trust women regarding emotional things. We've got a few friends we absolutely trust, but so many of us remember grade 8, you know, we're not going to trust a woman we don't know well as far as we can throw them. And this goes into the interests. When I was working in music programming, there was this dichotomy I noticed and pushed back against. The idea that the music that boys tended to like, meaning teenage boys, stuff like metal, hip hop, was considered dangerous and bad for you. You know, the whole parental advisory stamp, and satanic panic regarding metal. But girls' stuff like boy bands or pop princesses were considered shit. And the dichotomy was like, this is helping no one. Because if you listen to a lot of metal lyrics, they're intensely emotional. And, you know, hip hop as well. Hip hop, unfortunately, at the time was not marketed to the audience that it was made by and for. And so, you know, this was when acts like Eminem were coming up and hip hop was getting marketed to 14-year-old white boys in the suburbs. Obviously, you can see the issue there. And when you have this content that's, you know, this is when albums sold, you know, you obviously, a lot of Eminem's content may not be great for a 14-year-old boy. A lot of Britney Spears content wasn't great for 12-year-old girls. And yet, you know, we had this whole question of censoring rap and rock lyrics. But it became, you know, as the years have gone by, Free Britney. And it, you know, this is all you may notice unrolling into this: men are predators by default, women are victims by default. And yeah, there was a lot of criticism of Britney Spears' image at the time. I wrote some of it because, yeah, we needed to contextualize that for girls with the say one thing, I'm a virgin, do another thing, hit me baby one more time, in a very, very short schoolgirl outfit. You know, oops, I did it again. I played with your heart, got lost in the game. Great. Manipulating men is girl power? I would say no, but I've been reading romance novels. And this is part also of what this content's about. The thing I love about Two Women Talking is because, you know, song tolerates my interests, I sample hers, and she laughs as I suffer. It's because I'm looking at the girl world side of things, and I've come to some conclusions. Help support this channel if you like this content. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it to work out some of these issues, coffee.com/Leanna K. So your donations are greatly appreciated. They help not just me, they help other people. But yeah, they help me. I need money. But yeah, there's this thing in girl books, Twilight, 50 Shades of Grey, A Court of Thorn and Roses, about women having the shit beat out of them, treated as romantic. And at least in Twilight and A Court of Thorn and Roses, the first book, it pivots heavily after that. I'm on book 2 now. Book 2. But we all know with Twilight, like, Bella gets the shit beat out of her multiple times. And it's, to prove how much she loves Edward. See also Feyre in A Court of Thorn and Roses. And this, it's like they are trying to do, a song calls it pop feminism. Whereas something exciting happens, girls can be heroic too. But in Handmaid's Tale fashion, it's not really about what the girls can do. It's about how much they can endure. That's not the same thing. And we look at Twilight or 50 Shades or, Sarah J. Maas's stuff, although Sarah J. Maas's stuff is pretty well reviewed. But before that, like, Twilight was considered crap, right? 50 Shades of Grey was considered fanfic crap with the names changed. And, okay, there's a lot of badly written stuff for guys, too. But we don't consider it badly written, do we? We consider it, dangerous or harmful. If somebody gets a clunky metaphor regarding women in something for men, we spend way too long debating Eve from Stellar Blade's ass. We don't go, oh, it's just shit writing. There's all these hot takes about it and all these, it's harming women. But we don't treat the violence in romance genre as harmful. And you'd think, logically, and logic has left the building on this, you'd think that it would be more harmful to teach girls that get beat up to show how much you love him, in a lot of cases to the brink of death. I was kind of horrified what a beating Bella took in that first Twilight book, and it just went on. Have a pregnancy that will likely kill you. Show you love him. But we see that as shit. We see that as bad. We see that as trash. We don't see that as dangerous. We see, I think it's funny how Bayonetta has been redeemed now, because at the time she was bad for women too. And I thought that fucking game was brilliant with the enemies being the cardinal virtues. I'm like, this is so feminist. But I was in the minority, as usual. That doesn't make me wrong. I argue that makes me more likely to be right, because I'm actually applying things and taking a holistic look and not doing follow the leader bullshit. Because it's not the same, this is junk versus this is dangerous, right? It crushes the spirit of boys in a different way than it crushes the spirit of girls. And this is one of my theories about where this reaction we get from a lot of men regarding media comes from, this idea that media is attacking them. Because the feeling's very real, but the claim doesn't make sense. And it only works through the lens of this media is dangerous, meaning media for men, video games, comic books, action movies, so on and so forth. This media for men is dangerous because of how it presents women. That's what men younger than me grew up in. It's been really intense since 2012, but it was sort of building before then. This is what they came up in. So anybody, I guess, 30 or younger, give or take, right? Ish. Has been given this message that your content is bad and dangerous because of how it depicts women. I can see how applying that to something like She-Hulk, something like the Man-Bear thing, if that's attacking women, right? If the content for men was dangerous to women because of the depictions, well, then how is this stuff not dangerous to men because of the way men are depicted? And you can argue the nuance of something like She-Hulk. I have, but I'll also argue the nuance of something like Bayonetta or Tomb Raider. Like, yes, Lara Croft was supposed to be mad, bad, and dangerous to know. Nerfing her did not make her better. And now we have Silent Hill 2, which is getting a remake, and there are already warning signs that the themes of psychosexual guilt from the original are being nerfed because, and I mean, we don't know, well, we can assume some of the scenes are from the beginning because it's the Welcome to Silent Hill thing, but it looks like Maria's outfit has been changed, and dressing Maria the way they did in the game was because, Husband Bad. I'm blanking on his freaking name right now. I always get the Silent Hill and Resident Evil guys confused. So I always called him Leon, but I don't think that's his name. But the whole reason everything's like bondage gear in that game with Pyramid Head and company, the sexy nurses, because the sexy nurses is a trope that's so stupid. It was this horror game based on toxically masculine tropes. And I do think that there's a place in a mature rated game. I mean, that game is not for kids, which is why I juxtaposed it with like Eminem's music being marketed to 14-year-olds. That's a mature rated game. We should be able to handle the tension men experience between kind of, the toxic parts of themselves, the same way that I've seen commentary on these romance novels justify a lot of horrible shit because you're supposed to believe there are toxic elements to this that you guys don't know what I'm talking about, so I'll spare you. That was feedback I got. They're like, people had trouble following the Court of Thorn and Roses conversation, but that's okay. We made it through. They got it by context. But that connects to me. And we know that teenagers won't talk to you if you shit on the stuff they like. So there's no point in shitting on video games or anime or, movies or whatnot. And teenage boys have gone crazy with the boobies as long as there have been teenage boys. And I do think there's a way to do the fan servicey stuff without sending dangerous messages, right? And girls are no less vulnerable to that messaging, toxic images about the opposite sex. Like, my God, these heroes. I'm like, there is nothing special about these guys. At least Resent talks. Oh my God, that's a Court of Thorn and Roses character. But I always like the guy in those books that no girl ever pays attention to. I'm like, he's the best. Because he's helpful. Because he actually does his best to tell women the truth. I mean, they had to heel turn Jacob so much at the end of near the end of Twilight just to make the Edward Bella shit stick. It was not subtle. Because I mean, Jacob was objectively the nicer guy of the two of them. Edward was a dick. And making this whole, the bad boy is what you want. The bad boy being centered. The bad boy isn't what the bad boy used to be. The bad boy used to be a guy who was, you know, outside of society, but showed emotions. That's not what happens anymore. These guys are ciphers. And brooding becomes stonewalling very, very quickly. And stonewalling is really bad for relationships, ladies. Like, you shouldn't have to drag shit out of him. And you certainly shouldn't have to put yourself in dangerous situations to prove your love. For a guy who barely says 6 words, you just think he's hot, you know, and he has money, and so you're in love. No, that's not love. That's not freaking love. Love is what happens when you see the things that are more challenging in another person, and you still have feelings for them anyway. When you're still looking at someone as perfected, you can't say you're in love with them yet. And that is the problem with characters like even Stellar Blade, not that there's really a love story in that, or characters like Edward Cullen, you know, or Tamlin in A Court of Thorn and Roses. Like they're just inert. They're just, I remember when they just described Edward Cullen as, he looked perfect. And they described Rhysand's first appearance in A Court of Thorn and Roses as, he was the greatest looking man, like the most beautiful man or the most attractive man I'd ever met. And that's it, other than he has dark hair and pale skin. Like, they don't put any tangible, it's just perfection. And you're never going to meet that person because real people have distinguishable features, right? And looks not only fade, people either get better looking as you talk to them or less good looking as you talk to them. And so if you're encouraging women, like when they're teen girls, to only talk to the perfect looking man, you're going to miss out on a lot of great stuff, and you're going to end up getting abused by a lot of assholes because those guys, they work on that and they've calibrated that. And, you know, the trope is, if he's that pretty, he's going to be an asshole and you're going to get hurt. And it takes, you know, a lot of abuse in getting out of a really bad relationship for women to realize, no, that's not the ideal. And, you know, I see a lot of really nice guys stuck on the sidelines, like Lucian, my fucking favorite character in A Court of Thorn and Roses, because they're actually decent. And so all they do is continue to help the woman who is totally ignoring them in lieu of perfect grunting man, brooding grunting man, bear. Literally Tamlin turns into a bear monster in A Court of Thorn and Roses. I'm not kidding. But, you know, and that guy usually gets tortured to advance the plot somehow. In Lucian's case, multiple times. Of course, he's a ginger. But we spend all this focus on men's media being dangerous for women, we don't really talk about women's media being dangerous for men. And the argument used to be that it's because romance novels previously weren't centered in society and content for men when, 18 to 24 male was the most desirable advertising demographic on television, and movies, summer blockbusters anyway, were all calibrated for 14 to 18-year-old boys to get teenagers into the theaters. That shifted, though. Now the A Court of Thorn and Roses series is being sold in airport bookstores. And the most desirable demographic in media is 25 to 54 female. So there's been a shift. There is a pivot. And yet we're still crushing boys' interests. And we're still treating women's stuff with just as many toxic messages, if not more so, as, harmless shit. It's just crap. It's just bad. I argue a lot of it for boys and girls was shit. Only 15% of any of it is good. They say only 5%. Or, sorry, is it 90% of everything is crap? But you know what? When you're a kid, you like it. That's good. The old He-Man cartoons are hilarious to me now. But there's a sweetness to them. There's it's simple and goofy and terrible, but I love them. The old X-Men cartoons were so soap opera-y, like the ones that X-Men 97 is based on, because I'm rewatching them. They were so soap opera-y, but they were a good time. They really were. There was a lot of men showing feelings, which I didn't put together at the time. But, now I'm like, this is great. This is an amazing cartoon. And this was on Fox Kids. It showed a lot of guys expressing a lot of very vulnerable moments. And it was still, comic books are misogynist and depict women terribly. I mean, yes, they spent a lot of time animating Rogue's ass. They did. Won't deny that. Somebody had a thing for Rogue on that show. But she still saved the guys so many times, and nobody screamed that it was politically correct back then. Now it would be called woke, which it kind of did. But, things have shifted, and I think that because we're still using that old media paradigm that was established from the 70s into the 90s, because we're still using that, but the center of media has shifted much more towards centering media for women, and it's not because out of the goodness of anybody's heart. It's straight up capitalism. The advertisers want to sell to women because there's an amplifying effect in households. Just the money you spend targeting women goes farther. Also, white men are more likely to pirate. So that's why you see a lot more media aimed at black people too. Black people just pay for TV. Period. End of story. So, and then we get Game of Thrones still, because HBO is always 10 years behind media trends. They've always been bad that way. Even though they do groundbreaking television. But we haven't changed the messaging, even though the center has shifted. And that is my thought about why men feel like their spirits are so crushed, feel like their interests and their identities are under attack. That makes sense to me. Now, what we do about it is not go back to the bad old days, because, a lot of guys played that because they could get it, but I know a lot of guys who like games, but they were like, yeah, that's stupid. Um, it we can go back to having a happy medium and recognizing that because those stories aren't centered, though they're talking about a Stellar Blade sequel, so they sell well enough. I mean, Stellar Blade with a better narrative and a more interesting main character than Eve, because Eve is just once you stop laughing over the ridiculous jiggle physics, there's really not much to her. And quite frankly, the costumes that you get with more fabric later on are, for me, a lot sexier than the bathing suits or the skin tight rubber diving suits. There's a couple of like jeans and like jacket combos that are pretty smoking hot. Unfortunately, the animation on some of the jean pockets wrecks it because, again, it's stretching in abnormal ways. Like, wow, what is going on? But there are a few outfits that are pretty sexy that show much less skin. Overtly sexual isn't always sexy. We can have content that allows guys to thirst. That's not unhealthy. Playing hero is not unhealthy. We don't have to have the video games don't cause violence conversation anymore. And if somebody wants to play a violent video game, that's fine. I mean, we're going to have a real reckoning when the Warhammer series comes out. If it comes out, who knows? They all might just walk away before it does. But, the Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy keep doing really great westerns in Westworld, and I know everybody fell off on the third season, but I loved that show. And then Fallout, and I really recommend going back and watching Person of Interest. One, because it was Taraji P. Henson's breakout role, but it was also a really, really interesting piece of speculative fiction that went from being a, out there sci-fi concept to being, oh shit, they discovered the PRISM program. Now we're talking about current events. So it was a good show too. And you can have guys get the girl or the boy, and you can have sexual content, and you can even have sexy bodies in something without it being bad for anybody and without it slamming you over the head with its point. It can be done. This is why I got into, DEI work, or as people say, DIE, because this is die. Like, that's why I got into it, because I wanted to let everybody have their fun and have it not be offensive. And of course, this makes me the enemy now. I always end up in this situation because I'm like, I want solutions when everybody else wants to fight. But there are people out there, I know, who want solutions too. And a lot of them were the guys that had really bad reactions to the man bear thing. And because the things they like were shamed when they were young, and there's a trauma there, of course they're going to regress and start behaving like the age where their spirit was crushed. And so we got to do better by boys now. We got to stop telling them that they like is bad and instead go, why do you like that? And, if you check your fire, if you check your swing and ask boys why they like what they like, I think you will really be pleasantly surprised by the answers. Because every time I've done that to a young man, his answer has been extremely, extremely feels. It makes me happy. It makes me go heart, right? I'm bad at the anime heart. But yeah, try it. And let's try to, understand the rawness that is still there with guys because they feel like they can't win. And I think that that's an important and valid feeling. And we validate feelings. We may not validate opinions. We may not validate behaviors, but we validate feelings here. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching Manly Mondays.